Let's see. We are live. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We are on. Hope everybody's having a great day, whatever part of the day it is, week, month, whatever part of the week, month it is. If you are watching this on replay, you all know what the topic is. The topic is misinformation is actually a good thing. I know most people have used this term to tell you that you're receiving something that may not be good. I'm going to tell you why misinformation is actually good and why you should have no problem with someone sharing what has been labeled misinformation. As a matter of fact, I don't even think misinformation is even a real thing. I'm going to explain all of that as we get into our topic here today. So let's get right to it. We only got about a little bit over 30 minutes. So let's get right to it. And by the way, I will take all comments at the end. So if you have a question or comment while I'm talking and you post it, I will get to it, but I'm not going to stop what I'm saying in order to address it. I'll address all of them at the end when I'm done getting through my points. And by the way, work on your game university. Y'all want to know where the next step is? That's where it is. So anyway, the definition of misinformation is, according to Google, false or inaccurate information, especially that which is deliberately intended to deceive. That's what they call misinformation. Again, false or inaccurate information, especially that is deliberately intended to deceive. They have come up with this new age term and labeled this misinformation. I disagree with the label of misinformation. This used to just be called lying. All right, what they call misinformation now, didn't they just call this lying? If you give somebody some information and you're deliberately intending to deceive them with some information that you know is not true, that's not misinformation, that's a lie. There's just a lie. There's no what is misinformation? It just makes it sound like nicer than it actually is. And this is one of the things I've talked about also when I talk about the attack on language, where people are playing around with the way that we word things to make things sound or feel a little bit different than what they actually are. All right. Gender affirming care that's not what it is. What it is mutilating a child's body. That's what it actually is. And that's nonsense. But see, if you called it that, then it probably would not be as widely accepted as it has started to become. All right. Misinformation, what people call misinformation, simply means you're lying. All right. You're telling a lie. That's what it is. People are trying to come up with these other terms and make these things sound like something that they're not. And I thought about this because I saw that some people were making some videos on YouTube, and I'm live on YouTube right now, and they were talking about like climate change. You know, they had this whole conversation about climate change, and people are like, well, you're a climate change. Some people were saying they think all these things are happening with the climate. Then other people were saying, well, they're not. And there was this big argument. Well, is the climate changing? Yes, the climate is always changing, but is it changing because of things that human beings are doing? There's an argument about that. And some people have made some videos and they were saying, well, yes, the climate is changing, but it's not because humans are doing anything specific. The climate is going to change whether we do something or not. And YouTube decided unilaterally that they were going to start demonetizing certain content if people were saying certain things. They did the same thing when it came to the virus. They've done the same thing when it comes to the child affirming care, like I just mentioned. They do the same thing on other subjects. Now, YouTube is their own company. They can do what they want to do. The issue is they're labeling these things misinformation, i.e. you're intending to intentionally deceive people when the question has not clearly been answered yet. There's still a debate going on this thing. So how can you call it misinformation? And by the way, again, there's no such thing as misinformation. It's just a lie. All right. If you're deceiving someone on purpose, you're lying. You're not misinforming them, you're lying to them. So anyway, with all of this, I believe is a bad strategy. And this is the reason why I'm pointing it out. Not just about the concept of misinformation itself, quote unquote misinformation. I won't do the air quotes every time I do it, but y'all get what I'm saying. And I think it's a bad strategy that if you believe someone is misinforming, to try to silence them, shut them down, or not let them talk. I do not agree with that. if I'm saying something and I'm on 7 different platforms right now, if I'm saying something that you vehemently disagree with, I'm talking to the people who run these platforms, you really disagree with what I'm saying, and you really believe that what I'm saying is intentionally or deliberately deceiving other people, you should not block me. You should not kick me off the app. You should not suspend me. You should not delete my account. Don't do any of those things. What you should do is let me keep talking. And today I'm going to explain to you why you should have that same idea about anyone else who shares something that you believe is misinformation or it's intentionally deceptive, and you believe that they know they're telling a lie and they're telling anyway. Don't block them. Don't shut them down. Don't take away their right to say what they want to say. You should actually let them talk as much as possible. And today I'm going to explain why that is. I'm going to give you 3 points here, then I'll recap, then I'll take questions. So the topic again today is misinformation, quote unquote, is actually a good thing. And I'll take all questions at the end. Point number 1, bad ideas expose themselves. Bad ideas expose themselves. If someone has a really bad idea or they really suck at a job and they've been promoted even though they never earned the promotion, or they're getting a whole bunch of attention even though they have no substance and they're not actually good, or you believe someone is getting rewards that they didn't actually earn, if you believe any of those things are true, as long as you let them put themselves out there as much as possible, eventually they will expose themselves. This is what we should do with any form of what you all call misinformation. I'll just call lying or deceiving. Just let people talk. And if someone is really as bad as you think they are, eventually they will expose themselves and you won't have to say anything. That's what happens with a bad idea. So you don't have to fight against a bad idea, or at least you don't have to fight in such a way like you're trying to stop them from being able to speak. If someone comes out, if I get on, I don't really engage in a commentary back and forth with anyone's on anyone's social media platforms. The only one I do is X. I also known as Twitter, where that's kind of like the town square and we talk about current events. I will engage there. But if I see someone put out something that I know is some nonsense and I believe they're misinforming the audience, I'm not trying to block them. I don't go report them to Twitter and try to get their account deleted. What I'll do is engage with them and explain to them and to the public why what they said is not true. I will engage with the person when they have a bad idea, and I'll show why their idea is wrong. Because if someone's idea is wrong, you should be able to easily explain that it's wrong. You should be able to easily debunk it, right? So if I put something out there and you think I'm wrong, it should be easy for you to point out why I'm wrong. Just explain logically why I'm wrong without personally attacking me, without being sarcastic, without committing any logical fallacies. Just explain why I'm wrong. If I'm actually wrong, this should be easy for you to point out that I'm wrong. If someone says that in basketball you're allowed to kick the ball, I should be able to easily debunk that that's not true. If someone said in soccer you could pick the ball up with your hands, it's easy to debunk the fact that that's not true. But if you don't have a solid argument as to why someone's point is wrong, you can engage with them and let's figure out. Let the ideas spread and let's find out what's actually true and what's not. Or maybe there's just a debate. Maybe it's a matter of opinions. Sometimes it's just a matter of opinion. Some people want to vote for the Democrats, some people want to vote for the Republican. There's no right or wrong. There's no lies and truth. It's just what is. I choose this side, you choose that side. Let's duke it out and let's figure out who has a stronger argument, who has a stronger case. That's what should happen with any form of, again, what you all are calling misinformation. There's no such thing as misinformation. If someone is really bad at what they do and they are getting attention that you feel like they have not earned, you should let them get as much attention as possible, because if they're actually bad, eventually the exposure will expose them and then their whole thing is going to fall apart. That's what happens. If someone is actually bad, let them talk as much as possible, because it's going to be obvious that they're bad. This is one of the reasons, by the way, excuse me, that in the current political campaign season, people are saying, and I listen to people who kind of talk about this stuff for a living. I only pay attention when the races are coming up, but these people talk about this stuff all day, every day. They're saying that with Vice President Harris, that the more she talks, the more interviews she does, even if she's doing these puff piece interviews with Oprah Winfrey and she's going on these platforms that are friendly to her, just the fact that she's talking, period, the more she is exposing herself and kind of hurting her chances of winning. When she was quiet and saying nothing, it looked like she had a whole bunch of momentum. But the more she has spoken, regardless of what she's saying, she is exposing herself. Now, some people don't agree with that. Some people do agree with it. The point is not whether you agree or not. I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican. The point is exactly what it's it is solidifying or supporting this point that I'm making here. Point number one, that if you just let someone who you believe is not that good get seen, heard, and exposed as much as possible, eventually they will collapse under the weight of their own inadequacies. That's how it works. So it's like if you're on a basketball team, for example, and you're not starting, you're coming off the bench, and you're mad because you feel like the player who is starting above you is not really that good. Well, okay, I mean, maybe you can't do anything about it because you're not the coach, you're not in charge. But as long as the team keeps playing games and that player who you believe is not good, if he keeps playing, eventually it's going to be obvious that he can't play. And eventually he's going to expose himself because the more playing time he gets, the more obvious it's going to be that he can't play, right? So if you just argue that he can't play, but he never gets a chance, well, look, he can make the same argument that you're making. So again, allow bad ideas to get exposed. People will see bullshit for what it is when it gets exposed often enough. This is why, first of all, while we had the First Amendment in the United States. First Amendment states that people have the right to free speech. People can say what they want to say within reason. And even if you disagree with what someone else says, if you disagree and you have a logical, rational reason why, then counter what they said, let them continue exposing their position, and eventually everyone will realize that their position is nonsense, or maybe people will realize that their position is actually pretty good. Maybe their position is not as bad as you thought it was, and maybe you have to adjust your thinking and adjust your way of looking at things. Critical thinkers have this ability. Again, if something is actually bullshit, it will expose itself. And the more a bad idea gets seen, the less chance that it will ever show its face again in public when it's obvious. I'll give you an example. I was playing basketball I was in Mexico. This is probably like 2006, something like that. And I was riding around. At this time, it was a bunch of Americans. We were going on. They do these like tours in Mexico, and then they try to get you on the team. So I eventually got on the team. But at first, I was riding around with these Americans. So it was like 8 of us, and we were in this big Suburban. And there was this dude. I remember this guy. He was from Memphis, Tennessee. And he is a big dude, like 6'8". And we're riding in this van. We would be riding in this SUV for like 4 hours. We're driving all across Mexico, et cetera. And I'm sitting in the second row of the seats. And this guy was sitting in the third row. And he's like 6'8". So I guess he felt like he needed to stretch his legs out because he had to know you got your knees are bent sitting in the third row of a SUV. So this guy, he takes his shoes off and he puts his foot up on the seat in front of him. His foot was like 3 feet away from my face while we're all riding in the van. So he puts his foot up next to me and I notice it. The first thing I do is turn around and say, yo, bro, this ain't gonna work. And he said, it's gonna have to, man, because I guess he was saying that his knees were bothering him, so he had to stretch his legs out, right? So I'm just looking at him. Everybody in the van is seeing this. Nobody's saying anything because this guy's big, aggressive guy. So I guess people didn't want to get into a conversation with him. I didn't say anything immediately. I just sat there and I'm thinking, how am I going to address this? So I turn around. I'm thinking to myself for a second, how am I going to address this? But then, literally 5 seconds go by, right? 5 seconds go by, and all of a sudden, it smells like we are driving past a farm or a zoo. And you ever been to a farm or a zoo, you know what it smells like. It smells like mulch and horse manure, and it smells like all these it just smells really bad. That's what it smelled. It smelled like we were driving past one because we're on like a highway in Mexico. And the guy sitting in the front row and the driver. So the driver was this guy named Ricardo. He's a Mexican. And the guy sitting in the front row, I'm not going to say this guy's name, but he was a black guy, American. He's sitting further ahead than me. And then the people sitting on the other side of this guy's foot in the second row, all of a sudden, everybody started noticing the smell. And we realized what the source of the smell was. It wasn't who we were. It wasn't that we were driving past a farm. It was this dude's foot. This dude hadn't changed his socks in like a week. So and he got his foot up on the seat. So all of us started smelling the smell. And then everybody in the SUV was like, yo, put your feet down, yo, put your shoes back on. And everybody in the car started saying that. Even the driver, Ricardo, was like, yo, put your shoes back on. And this guy was so embarrassed by the fact that we all started saying that to him that he put his foot back down and it was all over. Now, what does that have to do with what I'm talking about right here? What does that have to do with misinformation? What it has to do with it is when someone is doing something that is really ridiculous and really bad, sometimes you don't have to push back against them. Because if it's really ridiculous as you say it is, it will be so obvious that eventually they will collapse under the weight of their own ridiculousness. And that guy putting his foot up, it became obvious in a second that he probably shouldn't have his feet out, and he never put his foot up anywhere else the rest of the time that I was around him. So when someone has a bad idea, let it see sunlight. they will expose themselves. They will ruin their own credibility. You don't have to do anything. So in the 48 Laws of Power, one of my favorite books, I believe it's in this book, might be in the 33 Strategies of War by Robert Greene. He talks about this, that you want to give your opponent enough rope to hang themselves. Sometimes you don't have to defeat your opponent. You just want to stand back and let them destroy themselves. Napoleon Bonaparte said, when your opponent is in the process of making a mistake, do not interrupt them. Just let them make the mistake. You don't have to do anything. Moving on to point number 2. We're talking here today about why misinformation is actually a good thing. And there's really no such thing as misinformation. I'm just using the term because y'all know what it is. Misinformation is actually lying. But point number 2, when you try to suppress an argument or an idea, I don't mean you try to challenge it or attack it, but you try to suppress it, an argument or an idea, all you do is draw more attention to it and get more people to look at it. And the problem with that is if it's not actually as bad as you think it is, then all you did was help your opponent. When you try to suppress something so that nobody can see it, you only make the situation worse. Because first of all, let's understand something. The world that we live in today, everybody, information is very easy to create, is easy to find, and is easy to share. Is this true? And I don't care what kind of information it is, whether it's accurate information, whether it's information you love, whether it's stuff that you hate, doesn't matter. It's very easy to create information. It's easy to find information, and it's easy to share information. Or 2 taps of a button, you can share anything you find on the internet with everybody else who's following you. With 1 tap of a button, 2 taps, let's say, you can start generating your own information. Right now, I'm generating, let's just call this information. All I did was turn on a live stream. Anybody can do this. And when you're not watching me, you can scroll through whatever app you're watching me on, and you can find other people sharing their views, their opinions, and their information. It's very easy to do this these days. Therefore, you trying to block an opinion, even something that you consider to be misinformation, is an exercise in futility. There is too much of it. You can't block it all. There's too much. I would suggest you not get in this game. And if you're already in the game, get out of the game of trying to block someone from saying something that you don't want them to say, because there are too many other people who are also saying it, and you can't block everybody. You don't have the time or the energy to block everybody, nor do you have the ability to block everybody from saying that they want to say. That material will find its way out into the world on its own, regardless of what you do. All right, regardless of what you do, that stuff is going to find its way out there. So you have to stand back, as I just told you on point number 1. And if it's nonsense, let it get exposed as nonsense. Okay, it will find its way out one way or another, even when you try to block it. You can't do that. Okay, so this happens all the time now, and people will label things. Misinformation is one of the terms people use. Other one is people say conspiracy theories. Are here to say conspiracy theories or talking points, or people say tropes. All of these are nonsense terms that people have started to use more often as a way of labeling things that they don't agree with. And it's often that they don't agree with it. It's not that what the thing that they're labeling is wrong. It's not that it's factually inaccurate. It's just that they don't want it to be said, or they don't want people to hear it. So they give it a negative label so that other people won't even entertain it. The problem with this is the more often you do it, it's kind of like the boy that cried wolf. The boy who cried wolf. The more often you do it, eventually people turn around and say, well, wait a minute, what's actually happening here? Why are they labeling everything they disagree with all of a sudden is misinformation? Well, let me go see what's actually being said here so I can find out what's going on for myself. Let me stop taking everybody else's word and get my own information. This is what happens when you keep labeling things misinformation, or you label them conspiracy theories. Eventually, people are going to go find out for themselves, all right, why do you call everything conspiracy theory? Let me go find out what you're talking about. And then they're going to get their own information. And then when they realize that you were the one deceiving them, not them, but you, now they're going to distrust you. So you're actually digging your own grave when you do this. So now there are some things out there that are conspiracy theories. Some things out there are nonsense. Some things out there are lies. And some of them are not worth listening to. But the challenge with the world that we live in today, folks, is that you got to do your own research. It's not like it was back in the day. Back in the day, you could watch the news or read the newspaper, and you had honest journalists and reporters who would just objectively tell you what was happening, and they would objectively interpret what was happening. The reporter tells you what's happening. The journalist interprets what's happening. And they used to do this on an objective level. Yes, they may have had personal leanings, but they weren't leaning so far to this side or so far to that side the way people are today, to the point that we can't even trust the news. We can't trust the mainstream media anymore. Most of you get most of your information more from random people on the internet. And when I say random, I mean someone who is not with an official bureaucracy. They're not like with CNN or ABC or the New York Times. There's just a person who decided to put material out there. Someone like myself or some influencer on TikTok or YouTube. You get more information from people like that than you get from a mainstream platform. Why is this? Because we don't trust them anymore. And you shouldn't trust them because they all are so biased these days that they're not telling you objective truth the way they used to. And you can go verify that for yourself. Don't take my word for it. As I just told you. All right, go verify it for yourself. If I'm wrong, you can come back tomorrow and let me know I was wrong. So some of this stuff are conspiracy theories. Some of these things are lies. But you notice since the year 2020, you notice how a lot of things that got labeled conspiracy theories at one point now are accepted as true. Y'all notice that? They used to say this thing was a conspiracy theory, but now we've accepted that it's actually true. And the thing is, when they stop calling it a conspiracy theory, they do it really quietly. But when they label it as a bad thing, they label it as misinformation. They do that real loud, right? They make sure everybody knows this is misinformation. This is not true. But then when they accept it as the truth, they realize it wasn't a conspiracy. They do that real quietly. That you don't even notice that it happened. So a lot of things that get called conspiracies eventually get proven true. Now, when that happens, now what does that mean? I mean, we got to take everything that was labeled a conspiracy and reconsider. Was that actually a conspiracy? Let's find out. Now you got to do your own work. This is the challenge of the world that we live in today for all of you listening, is that you must do your own research. You got to get your own information. You have to verify your own facts. You didn't used to have to do this. You used to be able to turn on the news or read the newspaper and they would do it for you. They have abandoned that responsibility. So now you have to do it for yourself. If you want to know if something's true, you got to do the work. You got to do the reading. Don't just read the headlines, read the articles, find out what's actually going on, get your own information, and do not accept anyone's information but your own. Someone else can give you information that can point you in a certain direction, but you need to get your own information, even anything else. And I'm telling you right here, I say this on my show all the time. Don't take my word for what I'm saying. Go verify it. Anything that I tell you, you can use it as a clue to go look for your own information, and then you go verify. And if I was wrong, I was wrong. If I was right, I was right. You go find out. But I have no need to deceive you because I don't need you to believe anything. I don't need you to believe anything that I believe, and you don't need me to believe anything that you believe. Hopefully you don't, because that ain't going to work anyway. All your efforts to block other people from saying what they want to say are the exact thing that draws more attention to what that person is saying. And that's the thing you're trying to stop. You can't do it, folks. All right, let me remind you again. Do not try to block other people from saying what they want to say. Let them say it. And again, let them collapse under the weight of their own nonsense. That's how it works. And again, when you start doing this, people are eventually going to get curious. People like myself get curious. And I start wondering, well, why do you care so much about trying to stop this person from saying what they want to say? I mean, is it that damaging to you that you don't want to let them talk? Let them talk. And if I hear it and I'm like, all right, that's some nonsense, then I can just dismiss that person. But if you try to stop me from listening, now I'm going to work harder to try to figure out what they got to say. Now I'm going to listen even closer because you're trying to block it. Everybody got it? So often the energy that you are using is actually working against you when you're trying to stop other people from saying what they want to say. Moving on to point number 3. We are talking here today about why misinformation, quote unquote, is actually a good thing. And you should allow for more misinformation. And again, I call misinformation what it is, which is lying. Even if I think somebody's lying, you should let them talk. Because if they're lying, again, it'll be obvious. Point number 3. The cliche is the cream rises to the top. Everybody heard that before? The cream rises to the top. Or all of us have heard that before. Do you agree with it? Do you agree with the cream rises to the top? I think most people agree with the concept that if you're good at what you do and you keep putting in the work and you keep showing up and you're consistent, then eventually it will be obvious that you're good at what you do and you'll start to get your attention or your flowers or your recognition, your money, your success, etc. I think most people agree with the concept. Cream rises to the top. So guess how this also works? The inverse of the cream rising to the top is that I don't know what's the opposite of cream, but the garbage falls to the bottom. Isn't that true? If it's true that the cream rises to the top, then it must also be true that the garbage falls to the bottom, right? Because all rise to the top. Whoever is good and great at what they do and they're solid and you're consistent and you keep showing up, even if you're not being recognized now, you will be recognized at some point, right? That means also if you're garbage and you're trash and what you're doing has no substance and no value and you're not really helping people out and you are hurting people more than you're helping them, even if you're getting a bunch of attention now, eventually it will be found out and you will end up at the bottom. Isn't that true? Okay. So have the patience and the personal discipline to let bad ideas play themselves out. You can't fight against them because there are too many people with bad ideas for you to argue with everybody. You can argue with some of them, can't argue with everybody. There's too many people. You ain't got enough time, nor do you have enough attention. But if an idea is actually bad, it will eventually expose itself. So what we're really talking about here today, the theme of what we're talking about here is having the discipline to not try to stop people from using their free speech rights, assuming you live in the United States where you do have free speech. I don't care what somebody is saying, even if I vehemently disagree with what they're saying, I respect their freedom and ability to say it. And I actually want them to say it, because the more they talk, the more it's going to be obvious where the nonsense is. And if I want to, I can point out the nonsense in what they said. And if I don't want to, I can just let them keep saying it, because other people will find out and they'll figure it out. Oh, this person is full of shit. And they'll stop listening to them. That's what happens. But I'm not going to try to block you from saying what you want to say. Say whatever you want to say. And if it's garbage, good. And if it's great, that's also good. So here's the thing. Life, experience, and truth proves all arguments eventually. Life, experience, and truth eventually will prove what's what in all of life, in all of the humanity. Everything is proven by these three things. Keep living life, keep getting experiences, and keep defaulting to what's actually true, because see, truth doesn't change. Truth does not change. Lies have to change. Any of you may have heard the saying that, see, when you tell the truth, you don't have to remember your story. See, when you tell a lie, you got to remember the story. You got to tell which lie you told to which person, because you got to keep everything together. When you're telling the truth, you could get asked the same question 30 different times. The truth is still the truth. It's kind of like, any of you know anything about police interrogation, or let's say police interrogation, that when police interrogate maybe a suspect or a person of interest, when they're trying to figure out something that happened in a crime, what the cop will do is ask you to recount the events, whatever your story is. They'll ask you to tell them what happened, and they'll ask you to tell them the same story over and over again, like several times. They'll just come from different angles to ask the same question to get you to give the same story. And what they'll start to notice, if there are any, they'll start to notice the discrepancies in your story. So the first time you told it, you said you went here at 3 o'clock, but then the next time you told it, you said you went there at 3 o'clock, or next time you didn't get there till 4 o'clock. And they're going to notice those discrepancies in your story, and then they're going to use that against you in the court of law often. If you're lying, that's what happens. Your story keeps changing. And when people ask you to tell the same story from different angles, you can't keep up with the story because you can't remember your lies. But when you're telling the truth is always the truth. You ain't got to change anything. Like, if you ask me to tell you a story about something that actually happened, and I know it happened, doesn't matter how you ask me, doesn't matter what part of the story you want to pick it up at, the story is always going to be exactly the same, because I'm not lying. I'm telling you the truth. You don't have to remember the truth. You got to remember a lie. You don't have to remember the truth, but you have to remember a lie. So if someone is telling you some nonsense, eventually they're going to start falling over top of their own lies. So you don't have to fight against them. They are fighting against themselves by the fact that they're trying to tell a lie in a world where truth always ends up winning out in the end. The world that we live in, truth will always win out in the end. So if you're looking around right now in your circumstance or your situation or your life, and you see some nonsense, some misinformation, or some lies that seem to be winning right now, your eyes are not deceiving you. Maybe it is. Sometimes lies are winning, but in the long run, a lie cannot persist, because eventually the lie will get exposed. And y'all saw Cat Williams on the Shannon Sharp podcast. He said that all lies will get exposed. He said that on the show. All lies are going to be exposed. The challenge for all of us is that you may sometimes get triggered when you hear something that you disagree with, something that you really are against, and you want to shut that person up as quickly as possible. I'm suggesting that you resist this urge and never, ever applaud the suppression of a person's right to speak. I do suggest that. Do not applaud the suppression of another person's right to speak. Do not applaud anyone being removed, blocked, suspended, demonetized on any platform. Don't do that. You should be happy that people get to say things that you disagree with, because let me tell you what happens on the flip side of it. The flip side of any regime coming into power, and they say you can only have one opinion, you can only have one idea, and anyone who goes against this is going to be prosecuted, shut down, arrested, banished, etc. And there's only one regime that gets to decide what's true and what's not true. If we were to come to have that type of world, you don't want to live in that world. Even if the side that would be controlling it is the side that you like, understand eventually they're going to come for you. You don't want to live in that world. You want to live in a world where there is a healthy fight between one idea and another idea, one opinion and another opinion, one ideology and another ideology. You want there to be a healthy back and forth. Sometimes this side is winning, sometimes that side is winning. That's what we want. Why? Because it keeps everybody honest. That's what happens. When there's a healthy debate and a healthy back and forth between all sides, that keeps everybody honest. If it gets to the point that one side is just dominating and they can't lose, they stop being honest. This is said, there was a book called, I believe it was Animal Farm. Some of you know this book by George Orwell called Animal Farm. And it says absolute power corrupts absolutely. This is what happens. And there are some countries out there. I'm not going to say the name of the country because of one of the apps that I'm on right now that starts with the letter T, but they are run. That app is owned by a country that starts with the letter C. Over there, that's how it is over there. You can't, there's certain things you can't say. They would send the authorities to your house if you said them. There are certain things that I can say on this app about things happening in America that if you live in that country that starts with the letter C and you said that online and they heard it, you would have a knock at your door. Hey, we heard that you said such and such. Watch it. All right, that's your last warning. All right, you don't want that in America. And there are places in the world where that's a real thing. Don't think it can't happen. And if you're supporting any voice or opinion being shut down because you disagree with it, you are contributing to that, the progression of that occurring. You don't want that kind of world. You want the world where sometimes your side wins and sometimes your side loses. Why? Because it keeps your side honest. And the fact that your side wins sometimes keeps the other side honest. You want everybody to be honest. Honesty is reflected when everybody knows they can get beat. When somebody believes they can't lose, they stop being honest. All right, that applies to everybody. That applies to every platform. That applies to every political ideology, political party, etc. Any of you who's ever traveled the world or know anything about the world outside of America, go find out, go talk to somebody you know, ask them what it's like in these countries where one party is just in complete power and nobody can question or challenge them. Ask them what happens to people who go against that party. Ask them, find out. Those people get taken out of life. They get locked up somewhere. You never hear from them again. That's what happens. Y'all don't want that world. All right, so do not ever find yourself applauding someone who has an opinion you dislike being shut down, because that's the starting point of where it goes. All right, the slippery slope is that's where it ends, is that nobody can have an opinion other than the ones that the people in charge tell you you're allowed to have. And again, if you want to live in that world, go move to one of those countries because they got it right now. You live like that right now if you want to. Okay, so I say, let everybody fight it out. And if someone has some garbage, it'll be obvious. Okay. So what you need to do is be patient and let nonsense expose itself as nonsense. Or, hey, maybe you're the one with the nonsense. You got to be open-minded enough to agree that maybe you're wrong and they're right. It's not necessarily the people you disagree with are always the ones who are wrong. Sometimes you're wrong. But you got to be open-minded enough and enough of a critical thinker to accept that reality or that possibility, let's say. So let me recap. Excuse me, my points here. Topic is misinformation is a good thing. The definition of misinformation is false or inaccurate information, especially that which is deliberately intended to deceive. I don't know why people came up with this new term called misinformation. There's a more accurate term for this. It's called lying. If you intentionally give somebody information knowing that you're deceiving them with the information, you're lying. You're not misinforming them. You're lying to them. So I don't know why we came up with this word, but this is one of the things happening these days. This attack on language where people are changing terms up to make things seem nicer than they actually are. Anyway, point number one, bad ideas expose themselves. If somebody has a bad idea, just let them keep talking. Eventually, it's going to be obvious they have a bad idea. Number two, when you try to suppress an argument or an idea, you only make it worse because it's going to cause people like me to get curious. Why do you want to shut this person down from talking? It's going to make me go listen to them even more because you're trying to stop them from saying what they got to say. Number three, the cliche is the cream rises to the top, which means also that the garbage falls to the bottom. So if something is actually good, it will eventually get seen, and something is trash, it will eventually be exposed. All lies will be exposed, as Cat Williams said. And you don't want to live in a world where people are not allowed to say what they want to say just because you disagree with it. Because if it gets to a point where there's one regime in power and tell you what's true and what's not, and you can't go against it, all right, that is not a world you want to live in if you've grown up living in America, because you won't be able to make that adjustment. And if you want to live in a world like that, move out of America. There are plenty of countries who will accommodate you. With all that said, you got a question or comment, put it in the comment section. I'll address it. Over here on YouTube, Raimundo says, why do you think people are comfortable with believing a lie? You do yourself a major injustice by not doing the research yourself. Well, first of all, people don't know that what they're believing is a lie. I don't think there's anybody out there who said, I believe something is a lie, but I believe it anyway. Nobody says that. What most people believe, they believe to be true. And by not doing the research yourself, well, if you haven't done the research, then you won't know that what you believe is a lie. So you can't know until you do the research. The fact of the matter is most human beings are lazy and don't read and they don't think. So those are three truths about human beings, Raimundo, and everybody. People don't read, they don't think, and they're lazy. So research requires reading, thinking, and energy. So it's the exact opposite of what most people are by nature. So people can't actually know that they're lying until they get the information. Most people never get the information. So your question basically answers itself. Let me see if we got any comments on TikTok. By the way, workonyourgameuniversity.com. If you would like to work with me directly, have me as your direct coach, go to workonyourgameuniversity.com. Daily True says wordplay to influence the ignorant. Yes, well, wordplay can influence everybody. You can influence smart people with wordplay too if they don't catch it. Somebody said it's cloud seeding a thing. I don't know. You're asking the wrong person. Question is, do our elected officials still work for us? Technically, they do. But if you let them talk, it doesn't sound like they do. Elected officials do work for us. But if you listen to most citizens and even the politicians themselves, they talk as if we work for them when they actually do work for us. Technically, they do. Brown Power Ranger, you have smart dudes. All right, great. Let's see. Well, we said Trump being allowed to run for president says cognitive dissonance overrides what you're saying. No, why? Why wouldn't he be allowed to run for president? What reason would he not be able to? Risk Gainwell says, thank you for your knowledge and wisdom on daily. Thank you. I appreciate it. Young Man Reed, appreciate you. All In says, thoughts on Diddy? Well, he got to go to court. I mean, they charge him with a crime now. He gets his day in court, and we'll see what happens. The thing about those court cases, they take a long time to play out, so who knows? It might be a year before he actually, if it goes to trial, it might be a year before the trial actually happens. So that's all I can say about it. I do think outside of Diddy that since people have been talking about the parties where he was doing all the stuff, I think many celebrities are going to come out and say they were at the regular party, the one you see on TV, but nobody was at the after party where all the crazy stuff was happening. But Diddy wasn't partying by himself. So somebody was in those parties. And I think if the Diddy charges go to trial, then all that stuff's got to come out, and the federal agents got to put all the video, all the stuff they took from Diddy's house, they got to put all that stuff out during trial and for the jury to see. And I think some people are going to get exposed if that happens. So I think there's a lot of celebrities hoping and praying that that case does not go to trial. Either that Diddy cops a plea and the feds accept the plea, or that, what's another thing that could happen? I don't think this case is getting thrown out, so that can't happen. And another thing that could happen, God forbid, Diddy commits suicide, quote unquote, I can't say that word. I shouldn't say that word on TikTok. Diddy commits the S word before the trial happens. Hopefully that doesn't happen. I'm a fan of Diddy, the musician. I don't know anything about him personally. Never met the man. I'm a fan of the music that he created and was responsible for. So I would hope that doesn't happen, but that's one of the ways that this cannot go to trial. And I think there's a bunch of people hoping that if it goes to trial, some people getting exposed. That's happening. One Race Alliance on Instagram says, funny because it made our brain so lazy to know we're not going to do that. Yes, exactly. That's exactly what happened. The human beings are generally lazy. Human beings were generally lazy before social media came around. But social media made us more lazy. That is 100% true. But the good thing about social media, one of the positives about social media, is that there are people out there like myself and many others who are aiming to give you all accuracy and objectivity outside of the mainstream. And since we don't trust the mainstream anymore, and you should not trust the mainstream because they have given up all objectivity, especially after Trump came into power, that you got to find your sources. So these days you got to do extra work to find reliable sources for information. So yeah, I feel the same way. A lot of celebs are going to be outed if it goes to trial. And also Diddy has very good lawyers. Puff has very good lawyers. I mean, someone of his stature can afford the best lawyers. That lawyer is going to fight tooth and nail to make sure that those videos, if they have a trial, don't get shown in court. That's what they're going to fight to have happen. But at the same time, the feds have more resources than Puff Daddy. So they're going to fight to make sure those videos do get seen if they want to. There's a whole lot of things to consider right now, because do they actually want to expose those people? Because some people who have a lot of power and influence may get exposed if those tapes get seen. And I think some people are on those tapes. That's what I think. And one interesting thing I'll say about Puff is that he was, I don't know what the word is, let's just say sadistic enough that whatever he was doing in those parties, he filmed everything and kept the tapes. That's the part that makes him look kind of crazy. Now, if you was doing crazy things in a party and it wasn't on tape, that's one thing. Or even if it was on tape, but you deleted the tapes, but you did crazy stuff at a party and you taped it surreptitiously, meaning people didn't even know they were being filmed, and then you kept the film. Oh, then there was probably some crazy stuff going on, and you're crazy for even doing that. So I think Puff's a little bit crazy, and not in a good way, for filming it in secret and then keeping the tapes. So I guess he would watch the tapes back, I guess, to get off on that. Yeah, that makes him look kind of strange. Not kind of strange, very strange. Anyway, I do these lives, y'all, every day. We start at somewhere between 8 and 8:30 a.m. Eastern. So we'll be back here tomorrow. Work on Your Game University. That's the link in my bio. For those of you who want to work with me directly, that's what we do professionally, is work on Your Game University. Everybody have a great day. I'll see you all tomorrow. We out of here.